Good day to you all, and it is good to be back for our online Bible studies. I'll be doing this every Thursday, so someday on Thursday I'll have it uploaded to our Facebook page, and you can access it from the Facebook page. Once you go to the YouTube page where the videos are, where they're located, you should be able to subscribe to that page. It's my own page, and so you should be able to subscribe. And when you do subscribe, it will give you a notification of a new video posted every week. But I'll have these up on Thursdays, by Thursday early evening for sure. And we'll be going through the Gospel of Matthew for the next several months. It'll take us 3 or 4 months to get through the Gospel of Matthew. And so that's what we'll be doing. Now today, specifically, I want to look at Matthew chapter 1 through 17. So if you could, just pause the video right now and read that section of text. And when you're done, then start the video back up again. Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. Now, I will assume you have read the text. So let's talk about this portion of text. It is rather interesting. It's interesting in that the way that the book starts. There's a phrase at the very beginning. It's in the original language. You can see it in the original language much easier than you could in the English. But this is a book of genealogy. But the word for genealogy that's used there is genesios. Genesios. And this is the same word that is used as the title of the first book of the Bible, Genesis. And so this idea, this genesios or Genesis, is also used in this genealogy. And so this is interesting because this has to be one of the reasons why Matthew was presented first in the New Testament. Because of this Genesis idea that's presented in verse 1 of chapter 1. As Genesis was the first book of the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, well, this book of genealogy, or this book of Genesis of Jesus Christ, becomes the first book in the New Covenant. So it's the same exact word that's used, and I think that's probably why Matthew ends up being listed first in the New Testament. Now there's 2 other labels that are given to Jesus here, the son of David, and then the second is the son of Abraham. Now Abraham's going to be important through this whole thing. I'm going to talk about that just in a second, but let's just start with the son of David. So the son of David is going to be critical as far as in the entirety of the Gospel of Matthew. As Matthew is trying to convince others, Jewish people mainly, of the messianic status of Jesus, it's going to be very, very important to tie Jesus back to David. This will be important when we talk about some things next week too, so keep this fresh in your mind about this description of Jesus as being the son of David. It has messianic declarations for sure. So like I said, he's called the son of Abraham also. Now, Matthew has a genealogy, and so does Luke. Luke has a genealogy, but Luke's genealogy, and this is the Gospel of Luke, Luke's genealogy traces Jesus' origins all the way back to Adam, the very first person, okay? And so, Luke has a different purpose, a different function. In Matthew only traces Jesus back to Abraham. Why does he do that? Well, Abraham is the beginning of the Hebrew people. Abraham was not a Hebrew person himself. He is the beginning. In fact, Abraham came from an area in southern Babylon, a city by the name of Ur. So Abraham was a Mesopotamian. He was not a Canaanite or anything like that. He was a Mesopotamian, and when God called him and brought him to this new area, this new region, this new land, he became the beginning of the Hebrew people. So Matthew wants to connect it back to Abraham as the beginning of the Hebrew people because he is trying to convince Jewish people of the messianic status of Christ. And so it's very, very important for him to go back to this beginning point. And so in Jesus, we have a new beginning in a sense. The new covenant and a new beginning. Abraham, there was a new beginning in the old covenant, but now we have something new for the new covenant. Now there's 4 females named. It's quite interesting. So you have, in verse 3, you have Tamar. In verse 5, you have Rahab. Also in verse 5, you have Ruth. And then in verse 6, you have the wife of Uriah. So these 4 females, they are all Gentiles. And it's very interesting that these 4 are named. Now, I don't think we should probably explore the gender problems associated with females back then. I don't think that that's what we need to do. In fact, I don't think we need to make too much out of this other than the fact that they are non-Hebrew people. There are many prominent, it's interesting because there are very many prominent Hebrew women that could have been named. Abraham's wife, Sarah, is a prominent figure in the New Testament. She's mentioned many times. Why she's not mentioned, I don't know. She's prominent. Rebecca, Isaac's wife, Rachel, Leah, Jacob's wife. You could keep on going. There are very many prominent women in the Hebrew history. But Matthew has chosen to name 4 that come from, that are Gentiles. So Tamar, who's this person? She was a Canaanite. Her origin is from Canaan. She was a Canaanite lady. She married one of Judah's sons. And Judah's the son of Jacob, one of the 12 tribes, one of the 12 sons of Jacob. And she married one of Judah's sons. And when she marries, she becomes part of that Hebrew community at that time, or part of that family, that nation in a sense, that community. She becomes part of that. So she's no longer Canaanite, but her origin was as a Canaanite woman. We have Rahab. Rahab is the woman in Jericho who saves the spies from some armed guards searching out, try to find them. But she is very helpful in protecting those spies, but also as far as helping them to survey some things in the city, some other things. But she lives in Jericho. She is not a Hebrew person. She's a Jerichoite, or more generally just a Canaanite. We also have Ruth being named. Ruth was from Moab, so she's a Moabitess. So again, Ruth, though, when she marries Naomi's son, because Naomi's family is Hebrew, she would become a Hebrew person. So, but their origins, their beginnings, are all non-Hebrew. They come from Canaanite or Moab, other places. Their origins are not associated with the Hebrew people. We have one more, and it's this wife of Uriah. Now, 2 things about this. The person's name is Bathsheba. For some reason, Matthew does not mention Bathsheba. I think I know why. I think the reason why she is not mentioned here is because she is the only person in this list who would be associated with a blatant sin. She and David blatantly sinned against God when they committed adultery. The other 3, there's no kind of wrongdoing in that way. There was no adultery, there was no violent actions, there was no hateful speech or anything like that. Nothing that we would consider improper. But for the wife of Uriah, or Bathsheba, there was. She was a blatant sinner who committed adultery with David. Probably why her name is not mentioned here. Now, also, the ESV has the wife. In the Greek, wife is not there. She may have not been the wife of David. She may have just been a concubine. But anyway, all it says in the original language is the one from Uriah. That's it. So her name's not even mentioned, nor is there given any kind of, special connective type of language given to her. She's not called the wife. She's just called the one from Uriah. And her name is not given. Now, these 4 women are very, very interesting in this respect. And this is why I do think it's important. They are all Gentiles. And in Matthew, in the Gospel of Matthew, as the ministry of Jesus expands, it will touch Gentile areas. In fact, one of the first miracles that Jesus does is the healing of a centurion's servant. And so that is obviously a Gentile person. And so I think Matthew really wants the audience to know that this new covenant that has been brought in, been planned and ushered in by God and accomplished by Jesus Christ, is for all people and not just the Jewish people. And I think that's going to be a very, very important message that continues through the rest of the Gospel of Matthew. Now, one other thing about this is in verse 17, it's kind of interesting. There are 3 sets of 14 generations given. 3 sets. It talks about 3 sets of generations. 3 sets of 14 generations. Why 14? Why 3? Well, 3, he tells us the reasons for the 3, I think. There's eras that he's looking at. So he says, from Abraham to David. So there's an era right there. And then from David to the deportation in Babylon. So that's the next era. And then we have from the deportation in Babylon to Christ. So for some reason, Matthew sets up these 3 eras of history. 14 generations in each, or 14 names listed. Okay, 14 names of the patriarch who fathered such and such. Okay, so don't count the mention of the ladies' names or mention of sons. Just mention the fathers. There's 14 generations mentioned. So why are there 14? That's the critical question. Why 14? What's so special about 14? It has to be because of the name David. So in ancient times, they did not have numerals. They knew about numerals. They had words for numbers, but they didn't have characters for numbers. You have to realize is that characters that we use for numbers, and any other language or people group that uses for numbers, that didn't happen until about 600 years after Jesus. No one had any idea about written characters for numbers. So what did they use? They used the letters of their alphabet, and they assigned numerical values to these letters. So when these letters are used in a way, and they would signify that they're supposed to be used in a different way, you would use their numerical values for some function. Let's put it that way. Now, the name David. In Hebrew, there are only 3 characters to the name David. There are no vowels in Hebrew. Their alphabet does not have vowels. And so it's a consonant language. So there are 3 consonants. So there are 2 D sounds and a V sound. Okay? And so the 2 D sounds, each of those, we have the letter that produces that stands for a numerical value of 4 also. So we have a D sound at the beginning and a D sound at the end. So we have 4 and 4, that's 8. You add those together. And then we have the character in the middle, the Vav, the Wa. Okay? It is a numerical value of 6. So if we add all this up, the first D sound, then the V sound, and then the last D sound, we have 4, 6, 4. David's name, numerical value, when it's all summed together, equals 14. That has to be the reason why we have the 14 sets, or the sets of 14, let's put it that way, the 3 sets of 14 generations. Because David's name, the numerical value associated with it, would equal 14. Now, is the Son of David title important within the Gospel of Matthew? Yes, it is very important. In fact, I was just scanning through real quick, and I found 5 places, just real quickly, where the Son of David title is associated with Jesus and has some meaning or some importance within a pericope within Matthew itself. Matthew chapter 9, verse 27, we have the first instance of someone calling Jesus the Son of David. In chapter 12, verse 23, we have Jesus casting out a demon and healing a blind and mute person. When this happens, people respond, this must be the Son of David, to Jesus. Chapter 15, verse 22, Jesus exorcises a demon, and when he does so, the Son of David title is applied to him. Chapter 20, verse 30, he heals 2 blind men, and when that happens, again, in fact, the blind men are the ones that are calling out to Jesus, Son of David, help us. So they call him Son of David. And then in chapter 21, verse 9, when we have Jesus coming into the city, the triumphal entry, as our Bibles like to entitle that portion of text. But as he's entering in, the people are using this title, probably not directed at Jesus himself. It's more associated with what's going on in Psalm 118. However, Jesus is a part of this as it's going on. So again, this Son of David idea becomes very, very important as we continue on. Now, next week, we're going to go into this just a little bit further, but I just want to go ahead and give you some idea about why this is so important, especially as it goes into next week. This connection between Jesus and David is very, very important. We know from the Old Testament promises that there was a promise given to David that his lineage would never depart from the throne. So it's trying, in a sense, to continue with this promise, to keep this promise fluid, is what's going on. Now, here's the problem. The only one that is mentioned of the parents of Jesus that are mentioned as being a descendant of David are, the only one is Joseph. Joseph is the one that's called the son of David, not Mary. Mary is not called the son of David. And so, but here's the problem, is Joseph is not the physical father of Jesus. So how does Jesus get plugged into the son of David or the David lineage? You see, he's not a physical son of Joseph, so he can't have that lineage through Joseph. And so how does this all happen? Well, here's the thing. It can't be Mary either. Someone might say, well, Mary, the mother, had to be from the line of David. We don't know about Mary, and no one would even, at that time, they would not even keep track of a female's lineage. Now, I'm not trying to be harsh or hurtful here, but that's just the circumstances of the time. People don't act like that way anymore, and I'm glad they don't, and they shouldn't act that way. But that's the way it was back that time. We don't know if Mary was from the line of David. We just don't know. And here's another thing. Ancient people never thought that a female had anything to do with the development of a child. I know it's odd for us to think this way because we've all had, 8th grade health, and we've learned about baby development within the fetus and so many other things. But this is not the way the ancient people think. They didn't have science. They didn't have the knowledge. They thought of this whole process like a planting of a crop. You put the seed into the ground, and then something pops up. That ground holds it, and then something comes out. Okay, that's the idea. They thought of a female's womb as a vessel, and all it did was carry the fetus, carry the baby. That's it. So everything that was put into the development in their mind, in the development of a child, came from the Father. Okay? Now, so since Jesus is not a physical son of Joseph, he cannot be a physical, he can't be of the physical lineage of David unless something happens. So what is it that happens? Even though the text doesn't say so, this is what has to have happened. Joseph had to have adopted Jesus as his own. So Joseph must have adopted him. And when that happened, then Jesus became part of the lineage of David. That's how it happened. And that's the only way it could have happened. Now, we'll talk about this more next week. But I just want to summarize something real quickly for you about the importance of this idea of the Son of David. It is going to be very important in the Gospel of Matthew that Matthew connect Jesus into this messianic lineage. The people were expecting it. Jesus is ushering in this new covenant, and so as he's bringing this new covenant in, it's going to be very, very, especially Jewish people, for them to understand that Jesus is the Messiah and he is bringing in this new covenant. And so this is going to course all the way through the Gospel of Matthew. All right, well, that's all I have for today. Next week we'll pick up and finish off the rest of chapter 1. And I look forward to the rest of our time together. Have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed this. Bye.